Welcome to Dialogue. I'm Richard Ouzounian. Whether you're talking about a stage where they hear the music of the night or music from the queen of the night, you're about to meet someone who is equally in control. She's a musical comedy star, she's an opera star, and she's an amazing person to talk to. This dialogue is with Rebecca Caine. So Rebecca, as usual, I want to get total disclosure out of the way. We did work together about, as someone said, several lifetimes ago when you were the first Christine Daae in Phantom of the Opera here in Toronto. But that's the past, and we always save the past till later when you're more relaxed. The present is you're with the Canadian Opera Company in the Cunning little Vixen. Now, people who have seen you as Christine Daae always knew you had a great voice, but they're amazed to hear that you're playing all of these, well, let's be frank, bizarre roles like Lulu and the Vixen and that. What drives you to play the crazier ladies?
Well, those are the Slinkies.
The Slinkies,
the Lulu,
okay.
and I did a role called Juliet, who's a very erotic siren. And I think it's because my ligaments are too long. I'm hypermobile. So I kind of move like the strings have, you know, I'm a puppet that has the strings cut. I come around corners and sections. So I think it's just a simple freak of nature that I seem to have a lot of success in the Slinky roles. But I also do virgins still.
Right, you do Pamina, right?
Oh, well, yes, I do. You know, maybe stretching the imagination, but but I do some of those. Although I noticed recently I was doing my first Marguerite, and in the beginning she's supposed to be running around, and the tenor is watching her, and I always felt that the way I moved was naturally young because I was young, and I'm still young, but I'm not as young as I used to be, and my natural body language is now kind of, you know, why are you following me?
Right.
And it was until the director picked it up and said, darling, try and remember, you know, 18.
Yes.
I thought, oh yes, I have to move like a youngster again.
As
strange, isn't it?
Tyrone Guthrie once had to say to a chorus, ladies, a bit more virginity, please. Now, in The Cunning Little Vixen, for our viewers who aren't familiar with the opera, it is not about, as many people might think, this winsome little soubrette, because the ad campaign has you, you know, looking...
Peering
out, looking
the bushes
devilish.
of my local park.
Right, but actually you are the animal, the Vixen. In fact, most of the people in the play are animals.
Yes, they are.
Well, what does that do to you? Did you feel you were a refugee from Cats, only with a good score?
I was worried about that. No, I don't, because this is character to play in there. I mean, it's not really just a story about a little fox. It's a story about a little girl. I find it very interesting in doing it in Sendak's designs, because I almost feel like a female Max. Only Max doesn't develop as much as the Vixen does. It's about a young girl, and she's thrown out on her own, and she has to deal with situations at a very young age, being adopted by the woodkeeper, and she rouses the chickens up to revolt, and then kills them all and makes her escape, and you know, finds another fox, and doesn't want to give up her independence because she loves it so much. And then she does, because that's nature, and she has babies, lots of babies. She can't remember how many babies. And then she's defending her puppies, cubs, and she gets shot. But her own little babies are still going everywhere. So it's the eco-opera.
That's very good. I mean, it is about, I was sitting there last night and one part of me said, this is charming, it's a lovely little fairy tale.
Yeah,
and the other part, I thought
there's,
you know, in the way, and I hope you don't think this is trivial, the way that Bambi strikes some intense chords, when the gunshots go off in Vixen and people die, it has that same feeling that you tap into something a lot deeper. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And when you're finally shot, I hope that I won't give this away for people, you think you're going to escape. You're laughing, you're joking, you're running around.
I'm running towards the babies.
Right, and you think you're safe, and then it's that last...
And bang.
Gunshot. It's like Mercutio getting stabbed accidentally under the arm in Romeo and
But
Juliet.
life and death it can be that quick, you know? I mean, that's it.
Now, the role is challenging because not only are you going through all these moves and emotions, but the stage, you alluded to, it's Maurice Sendak.
Brings a new meaning to the term grassy knoll.
But there's more than one gunman here. There's Sendak, who designed it, and Corsaro, who makes you run all over it, right?
Yeah.
It looked to me like a mountain goat's lair, and I sat there at the critical part of my brain going, those poor singers, how are they jumping up and down? It looked beautiful, but Is it difficult to try to get balance and get centered and be able to do good projection with all those levels?
Yeah, it's something that I am very interested in talking about and thinking about, because it's something I'd like to do years away, I hope, when I retire, is to work with young singers on movement. I've become, since I left Toronto, great yoga practitioner, love it. And I feel that pretty much that you should be able to sing in almost any position, as long as you've got, you know, the energy going down into the ground and everything from here up going up, as long as you've got enough space in here.
Right.
So I look at things like Vixen as a challenge to, obviously, the music comes first. If in any way I think that the tone of the quality of the voice is going to be harmed, then I'm going to not try and do the movement. But you know, it's wonderful to be able to show as much with your body as with your voice what you're saying, you know?
Well, in fact, some of the great moments in Vixen, not to undermine your singing, because the singing is every bit as pure as it used to be, but it's even stronger than it was in the past.
But it's a few years later.
But it's great. But some great moments are when you're not singing. When you and the hunter see the sunrise together.
Oh, isn't that beautiful?
It's a
But that's some of the
wonderful
most beautiful music in the opera.
It's exquisite. I
And
mean,
the Vixen's Dream as well.
Yes.
Nobody's singing.
No
It's
one's
just
singing,
fantastic
but your
music.
face and your body and your gestures carry it all. Now, again, people always like to say, well, sopranos can't act. You know, there's bad soprano jokes everywhere. You know, how do you get to those moments with no text to support you, and you're not singing, but yet you're there and you're acting full throttle?
That moment in particular, you just
Yeah, the sunrise,
you just let what's happening to her run through your head, and then it just goes into your body, and you also feel the music. I mean, it's not like acting, straight acting, when you're absolutely out there and you're making your own sense of time. You know, it's not ballet, and I get very scared if I get a review saying, you know, too balletic, because I want it to look real and grounded. So you just kind of, you just go with the moment, and you have those feelings as she's having them, of being, oh my God, wouldn't it be wonderful to be a woman? You know, you just let it come out of you.
Do you find that what's happening off stage and in your life as well impacts on you? I mean, I'm thinking of the fact that recently your father passed away, which a terrible time for you while you're preparing this opera, and yet the opera is all about death and rebirth. What do you do?
Well, I mean, I chose, obviously, first of all, my very wonderful Scottish singing teacher rang me up and he said, well, darling, I know I sound like a bad Brigadoon cast member, but darling, he said, you could be working on Rigoletto or, you know, any other, you know, father-daughter terrifying emotional things. He said, you couldn't be working on a better opera. And he's right, I couldn't be, because it is about the life cycle, but voice is emotion, and when you are full of tears and sadness, to sometimes let your voice go can be a very scary thing. So I think last night I just thought I had to do it for Dad, because apart from anything else, the beautiful set and everything reminds me of the Adirondacks, where my folks have a beautiful spread, and that we've had it for nearly 30 years, which for us is long, because we've all traveled all the time and we still do live in different countries. So to have roots there, and it's the huntsman at the end, it's like Daddy walking through a forest, you know, it's lovely.
That's it. Rebecca the Chameleon, you touched on that, because when I first heard this Canadian was going to play Christine Daae, I said, well, yes, but I've heard of her in England all along. What do you mean she's Canadian? They said, oh, no, she's from here originally. And you had to move and change an awful lot, didn't you, in your early years?
It was funny, when I was, my father had to go back into hospital, have an operation, and I drove down in a taxi down to the rehearsal room and had to do a rehearsal not knowing if he was alive or dead, and it was terrifying. And I got out of the taxi, and as I got out of the taxi driver, who himself was, you know, first generation Canadian, I'd say, just immigrated, he said to me, where are you from? And people ask me that on almost a daily basis, and I don't really have an answer anymore. And I did an article for the Globe and Mail the other day, and there was a big stress from the editor of, you know, where does she think she come from? What is her passport? People have this knowledge to know, and I can't really tell you. I know that wherever I am, people think I'm from somewhere else.
The American part of the equation, does that enter in at all? Because, you know, you were born Canada, did a lot in England, but you lived in the States
I had
for a while.
my childhood in the States, yeah, in Baltimore and in Princeton.
Now, what has that done? Because that, of all the three countries, it's the tale of three Rebeccas, the one I see the least.
Funny, because that was the school one, you know, and the high school one, and, you know, the 70s, and, you know.
So how did you repress that, or have you made an effort to repress that? Did you
The
not want to
70s, have we all?
No, I meant to be a Yank. I mean,
To be a Yank? Well, I think that the British slapped it out of me the sooner I arrived in England when I was 16. I remember walking into college and saying, I need the stuff for my class, and of course their interpretation of stuff is somewhat different from mine was at the time. And, you know, they'd say, howdy, and things like that. I mean, these were the days before they even had holidays when they went to Florida. They, you know, if they went away, they went to Spain. So all they saw was Starsky and Hutch and Westerns. And the thing that really made me pissed off was the fact that they treated me as if I came from a third world country and that I had no culture. And I felt I was in a third world country. The food was ghastly, and and you couldn't get, you know, any nice shampoo. It was awful. It was awful. So I felt very out of touch there. And then 4 years later, I was trying to do Eliza Doolittle on national tour, you know, with that accent not really in depth. I'm sure it's the reasons why I'm useless at accents.
now, you raised a good point. When you did this Eliza Doolittle at you know, a very, very young age, Alan J. Lerner was around near the final years of his life. Were you catching him? Did you see glimpses of the greatness that he had when you
No,
worked at
but
this
then
point?
I'm rather of the belief that an actor, a writer shouldn't direct his own work.
I'll hold you to it.
I know. And I think if you read any of Alan's books, I mean, between him and Rex Harrison, what was the quote? They supported more women than Playtex.
Yes.
I mean, his attitude to women was somewhat Stone Age. I mean, he would put his arm around me and whisper the note, and then send me out onto the stage to do it. He'd go and just tap me on the bottom every time. And I was only 20, 21, but still there was this... Julie Andrews wrote that she had a terrible time when they first did it. They would give her line readings. And certainly in the big scene, you know, how kind of you to let me come. They just sat me down and taught it to me like I didn't have a brain, a lot of it. This is what's happened, this is how we've always done it. And who was I to argue? I was 20, 21 years old and thrilled to be doing it.
But then from there on, you did bounce back and forth, and you did opera musicals, kind of this tug of war going on with you. Were you favoring one at the beginning, or did you want to be a musical theater star?
I desperately wanted to be an opera singer.
You did?
And yeah, I was doing yoga the other day and playing Turandot, and my father took me to see Turandot at the Met when I was 6, and I saw Birgit Nilsson and Franco Corelli, and I remember it just like that. Just shows that you can take kids to see the most extraordinary things and hook them. Of course, we didn't have telly in those days, and that's really when was that the question?
Well, it was what you wanted. Was it opera or musical theater?
Oh well, yeah, no, I didn't really hear any musical theatre. My mother took me to see Oliver in England when I was very small, and I don't remember it, but apparently I jumped to my feet at the end, burst into tears, and screamed, "More boys!" as the curtain call went in. I don't remember that. But I remember my best friend from high school, middle school, playing me West Side Story. And that got me, because that was really, really good music. And that was, of course, always my desire to sing that role. It's too late now. I mean, I'd like to record it, I suppose. But then I wanted to be an opera singer, and the only reason I became a musical theatre singer really is because I was thrown out of music school at such a young age that I had no choice but to go and to try and earn a living doing what I did.
You said thrown out of music school.
Yes, and I'm not surprised now, with all respect to the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. I had my first boyfriend. I was very young when I went. I was 17. I wasn't that interested in it, and I slipped through the cracks. They didn't rate me at all. They weren't interested in me. I didn't get sent to good teachers. Nobody encouraged me. I also thought, because it was a music and drama school, it was the only school I auditioned for, that it would be elective and I could do a little bit of fencing, a little bit of acting, and I could get some sort of wonderful all-round stage course, theatre singing course. But oh, no.
It's interesting. There's two schools of thought now, and I'd like to know what you think, is that that children who have a bent to be actors, singers, musicians, whatever, should plow ahead and do it right away. And then other people say, stop. Have a normal youth, go to a liberal arts college, learn about history and English, and come back in when you're 22, and when you're mature and can go to the performance school. Would you still, if you were doing it again?
You're talking about sending younger kids off to performance schools.
Yeah. Would you do it again? Would you at 17 go, or would you say, maybe I should go?
But I didn't think, I thought I was going to college.
But you weren't really. You were going to
Yeah.
theater and music school.
I suppose I was. Yeah, I suppose I was. No, I would go and have a normal high school education and go to college, study your thing at college, and always do as much Amdram and you know, all the kids that are in Vixen with us, do enjoy it.
Right.
Even if you end up not doing it, enjoy it, and you will get something from it. You will get grace, you will get discipline. You know, it's a wonderful thing for kids, I think.
So there you are in England. You've been doing My Fair Lady, kicking around, doing some stuff, and somehow you wind up in London. The siren call of Cameron Mackintosh and the really useful group and the Phantom of the Opera, and you wind up actually playing Christine Daae there for a while, right?
Yeah.
How did it come about, this moment that has ultimately brought you sitting here today?
God, it's all so strange, and you know, for little simple movements, and it never would have happened. I was just thrown out of music school, and I was working with a very small fringe opera company, and my singing teacher at the time's agent rang up and said that there was an open cattle call for Laurie in Oklahoma, and I didn't even have an equity card, a full equity card, which you needed to work in the West End in those days. So I went off thinking, very good experience, straight out of college, I'll go along and try out for a leading lady. And blow me down, I got it. So, you know, there I was, all in blue gingham and starring in the West End. I used to go and sit in Aunt Ella's rocking chair and just think, oh, this is easy. And that came off, and Cameron put me into My Fair Lady, so it was my third job, did that. By the end of My Fair Lady, I was very, 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 very burnt out. It was much too much for me. You know, particularly doing a comedy, my little adolescent mind would think, well, they laughed harder the night before, and I you know, what have I done wrong? And I was always beating myself up, and so I thought, you know, go into an opera chorus, which I did, and I would always be promoted and then get a small role and then a nice leading role, and then finally I was going to go to Glyndebourne, be in the chorus of Glyndebourne, which is a very important place for young opera singers, and I got a chance to do Maria and West Side Story, which was, of course, the musical that pulled me towards music. It was the only one I'd ever wanted to do. And my then agent, who was subsequently fired about 6 months later, just turned it down, said, you're going to Glyndebourne. Thank God he did, in a way. I was probably still paying him commission. But he... so I went to Glyndebourne, and we were doing a Domineo, and I was doing sort of Grecian urn, you know, one Grecian urn dancing, because I was, you know, the wiggly one, the slinky one. And Trevor Nunn's eye just happened to fall on me. And I think it was also when we were doing improvisations of our favourite cartoon dog, and mine was Snowy from Tintin, because we never had cartoons, we didn't have telly, so I was... It's paid off for this last role. And he beckoned me forward and he said, my dear... very Trevor, he said, you must come and be in my musical. And I went, no, because in those days people were saying you must never cross over, which all sounds like some sort of religious thing. Nobody will take you serious. Well, I was starving. I was starving, literally. I had to do it, and it was Trevor Nunn, for God's sake.
And it turned out to be...
And it was the Royal Shakespeare Company, and it turned
Miserables.
out to be Les Miserables. So, you know... and then, of course, Glyndebourne immediately thought, oh, she must have talent. And Brian Dickey asked me back for a small role. And from Les Mis came Phantom, and from Phantom came Canada Phantom, and from Canada Phantom came giving me my big break with Lulu at the COC.
But now we're getting ahead. We have to back up a little here. With Les Mis, I remember the first time I met you, I was curious how all of it went. And you used to tell these incredible horror stories about how when it first opened in previews and things, it was so long.
Oh, yes. We cut 45 minutes out of it.
And there was one point, I think you remember you said John Caird and Trevor Nunn had to actually put cloaks on and run out on stage to give people notes because they'd forgotten to tell them scenes were cut. Did you ever think, and this we're now talking back to 1985, 86,
yes.
that 13 years later this thing would still be selling out around the world?
Well, now it's become so much part of the landscape that I don't see it anymore. Occasionally I'll look up at the palace and I'll see the little face of Cosette, and I'll think with great pride, that's my character, because my character was that character when she grew up. And, you know, enormous pride, because I do actually think that of all the musicals in the 80s, I felt Les Mis had the most substance, which isn't saying a lot, really, is it? But moving swiftly on, Les Mis really. And also, everybody hated it. You know, we were absolutely slammed when we opened, so we were sort of a bit the underdog.
So you would have never
and My Girl won all the awards.
Right. You never thought it would have lasted and been so important.
No, but there was the wonderful few years we began to see the different casts, and I remember seeing the different Asian casts, and they were all perfect. You know, but another culture. It was so it's lovely, and for years they often cast people who look like me, who had big dark eyes and a large nose and wave their hands a lot, and so it's weird seeing oneself cloned, because then you get down to the whole corporate theatre thing, and that becomes a little creepy.
We'll creep toward that, but because you wound up on the next end of it, you came into Phantom in London, not as, of course, the original, which was Ms. Brightman, but you came in a little further down the line.
No, I did. I was the second alternate.
And it wasn't a happy time at first, there,
No,
was it?
I was absolutely tortured by all and sundry.
Because it was corporate?
It wasn't corporate in this case. I would say it was because Andrew had written the role for his wife. He was tortured by the fact that he wanted it to be wonderful, but he also didn't want anybody better than his wife. So any other girl, particularly at the beginning, was going to come in for a rough time, because we weren't Sarah to him, and yet we were playing the role that was made for Sarah. And I followed in two girls, Sarah and another wonderful girl called Claire. Claire's really like a rocker voice, and I'm much more of an opera singer.
Right.
And I also think that when you're the star but not quite, as you are in those alternate situations, you are a target for anybody who wants to play a power game and wants to get a kick out of you. So it's a very fragile and difficult position to be in. And I've been in companies with alternates doing me, and I've seen the trouble that they've had.
No, but after being bruised by it in London, one would be surprised, but I gather it was the great persuasive powers of Mr. Drabinsky persuaded you to come do it in Canada.
He did, yes, he did.
I hear stories that he just wouldn't say no and pursued and pursued and pursued and pursued. And
yes, he did all those things.
so what made you finally crumble?
I felt I had left the Phantom in London. They had eventually just not fired me, but they'd not renewed my contract because they said I wasn't good enough. And I'd had a lot of "you're not good enough." I'd had "you're not good enough" at college, and I've had "you're not good enough" at Phantom, and I knew I was good enough. I mean, I was right for the role. I was a young opera singer, and I felt that I wanted to have a go again, try and ride the horse that threw me, and there wasn't much else going on. I wasn't really in a state vocally to cross over to doing opera. And it gave me a whole start, and so we did. It seemed like an adventure.
And you came over, and very Dickensian. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. I mean, it was a gala opening. I still recall the opening night with the limousines clogging up all of Toronto.
I remember looking at Shopsy salesmen and just thinking, I wish I was you. Wish I was you.
And the royal family there, and Andrew Lloyd Webber and everyone.
Wow, Prince Edward.
Well, the royal family.
Don't get carried away.
All right, but
he's just an old vaudevillian like you and me now.
But after all of that, it sold out for months in advance. It was the hot ticket. It was wonderful to be in Phantom. But a couple of things happened, and the dream started to sour a bit. First of all, you got injured very badly on stage.
Yeah, quite quickly. I got really mashed my knee up, and had 3 months of physio and operated on, and then back. It was quite funny because in physio they had me sort of on point with my eyes shut doing things like this, and everybody else who was just trying to, get back to normal, because they had to get me back to my proper health to do the show, not just to be a normal human being.
But after that, then you got caught in a bit of a tug of war with your leading man, Colm Wilkinson, and Garth, your producer. Eventually, it had to go into arbitration, and it was all settled out of court and stuff. But
it's very, 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 very unpleasant.
But did you feel? I guess the bottom line. I'm not interested in who did what to whom and all of that. But it's what you felt.
Anyway.
But what did you feel like?
Well, Garth had told me when he first persuaded me, and I had to be persuaded to do Phantom again because it hadn't been nice the first time. It had been unpleasant.
Right.
And this is a fragile instrument. I only wanted to do it for good things. And he didn't keep his promise. It ended badly. It ended horribly. I felt I didn't want to be involved with corporate theatre anymore. And I have very strong ideas on the Disneyfication of the whole genre, really, which is, it's the buck that drives it. You know, when
Right.
you're standing front of house and somebody's saying, but I've come all the way from Saskatchewan and I can't see the chandelier, you think, well, I've had all these years of ballet and singing training, and
Doesn't that count for something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, when you left it, I remember you did say something, and I realize now it resonated on a couple of levels. You said, I don't want to be a victim anymore.
Oh,
And you-
because when you're playing a victim, people just
That's
think,
it.
you know,
Because
off
Christine
stage,
is
and
a
you
victim.
go, or even when they try and they think she's a victim,
Right.
I can have a go, and you'll go, no, sorry, no, I'm not going to take that. They recoil with even more horror because you're not the victim that they thought you were.
But then-
and
so-
you're just standing up for yourself,
Right.
as anybody would.
But what you were able to do because of Phantom then was go into Lulu. Bizarre work, but Lotfi Mansouri saw you and wanted to give you that chance.
Actually, it wasn't Lotfi,
Nope.
it was Brian Dickey.
Brian Dickey, my mistake, sorry. But he saw you and gave you the chance to go do the
Took
work.
a huge leap of faith.
But it made a big difference in your career, didn't it?
Well, and it made a huge difference to my thinking about my career and my confidence in myself and my confidence in my intelligence. And it kept me sane, spending a year and a half working on an Alban Berg score when I was singing Andrew Lloyd Webber every night. Kept my brain, I learned German. And then after I got Lulu on and went back in, I began working on my French and Italian roles because I had roles offered to me afterwards. So I always kept going.
And so the thing is now, the opera world seems to be your oyster, but you're fortunate. I remember you said to me once also you would like to do different operas, chamber operas, interesting things, quirky things. Do you feel that path is still open to you? Can you
Yeah, I think
exercise
I
it?
have done. I think I have done. It's sort of in my head, I think what I would really love to be in is a sort of opera company that has, you're always working with a bunch of real singer actors, some great voices in there, but some real stage animals, and that as an ensemble with a bunch of fantastic directors, just in-house working away and as singer actors. It's hard to put into words, but that would be my favorite way of working.
And that's the atmosphere you would like to continue to stay in?
Yeah, and I've been lucky. I've had quite a few productions in which they've been that wonderful and creative. And I feel now, I mean, I've been working 17 years or so, and I've worked with a lot of good people, and I feel that I have tools to put on the table. And I feel that the challenge with any director with me or a conductor is to just say, try this, and I'll go, okay, I'll try this tool, you know, or you don't like that tool, I'll try, how's that?
Right.
You know, the challenge is, catch me, you know, it's a tennis game. That's what I love.
And that's what, well, I personally, sitting in the audience, I love as well. So here we have you, Rebecca Caine. She may be a vixen, but I don't think you'll ever be a victim again. Thank you for coming here today.
Oh, Richard, thank you.
Thank you. For Dialogue, I'm Richard Ouzounian. Goodbye for now.